Welcome to the Injury Law Pod, the podcast that explores and demystifies the complex world of personal injury law. Each week, Missouri personal injury attorney Eric Bartlett dives into the legal issues surrounding personal injury cases to help you understand your rights and options when seeking justice and compensation for personal injuries. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the world of personal injury law together.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Injury Law Pod. I am your host, Eric Bartlett, 28-year personal injury lawyer, and this is the podcast where we discuss all things personal injury law related. And on today's episode, we have a special episode where I recently sat down with my daughter and a couple of her friends. When I'm out in the world, just about every day, somebody has a law-related question for me. I get a lot of questions, and my daughters and their friends always want to know things about the law. And generally speaking, it's things related to driving because they do a lot of that. And that is really one of their first interactions with the law and knowing laws and having to abide by laws. And so I get a lot of questions from them. And, finally, I had gotten enough that I thought, hey, come in, sit down, ask your questions, and we'll film it. And, this will probably be questions that other people would love to know the answers to. So that's what we did. We sat down here in my office and I just let them free for all questions and I answered them on the fly. And so we'll have those following this introduction. And bear with us. I was trying out my handy new microphones. And what we learned is that they're very sensitive. They pick up any movement on the microphone. So we had some audio quality issues, but my awesome video editor did her best to work around that. You'll notice some edits in the videos because, again, we were doing our best to salvage what we had recorded. So again, I hope you enjoy this. I hope you find it useful as always. And as always, if you've got any questions or issues, you're facing some kind of a serious injury claim and you need help, we're always here and we're always available for a free consultation. Just reach out. And with that, we'll take it away to our question and answer session I had with my daughter Macy and her friends.
There was an accident close to my house where a young girl was on a scooter and she was going down a hill and went out on the main road, and there was a car coming and didn't see her obviously because she was going fast and he was going fast, and she got hit by the car and passed away from getting hit. So how would you what would be the yeah, you can go from there.
What's the analysis there? Right. So obviously you have the little girl that was killed. So you're going to have a family that's wondering, what happened? Is this other driver at fault somehow? Is this all on the little girl? That kind of thing. So if that one comes in my door, we're going to investigate to see, again, now we're dealing with a little girl. So if we're looking at her fault as compared to the driver's fault, again, we don't know. Obviously, he's at least 16, and he may be older. Obviously, we don't know those specifics, but you're going to examine the fault of the little girl because you're looking at the ordinary care of a little girl versus, the driver has the obligation to exercise the highest degree of care in operating the vehicle. So that's something you all got to keep in mind. The standard for operating a vehicle on the roadways is the highest degree of care because you're essentially driving a weapon, right? It can hurt people, it can kill people. And so you're looking at her ordinary care of being a child against his highest degree of care in operating the vehicle. The questions become, was there any time for him to react? If he was paying attention, could he have seen her? A lot of times reconstruction can be done by accident reconstructionists to figure out how much time he had when he first saw her. Could he have taken any evasive maneuvers? Could he have hit the brakes sooner? Things like that. And, if it works out and there was nothing he could do, it's not his fault. If it works out that he could have done some things and possibly avoided it, then there's a claim to be made on him. So that's how that would get handled.
So hypothetically, if he was on his phone and he wasn't paying attention,
yes,
then that would be a claim that they could make on him.
Absolutely. And, you guys got to remember it. Obviously, I preach it, right? The whole being on the phone while driving thing. And it's so dangerous because by being on your phone, you lose a second, maybe 2 seconds of reaction time. And that's like a perfect example. Again, we don't know what happened in that situation, but that's a perfect situation where if, say, he's driving down the road, he's looking at his phone, and if he hadn't been and he could have seen her coming down, it started slowing, but he wasn't because he was on his phone and he hits her, that's game over. I mean, that's a clear claim against him. Even if she blew through a stop sign, again, you're talking about a little kid.
Yeah.
And so now, again, you get a 40-year-old woman who's on a scooter, blows through a stop sign, he hits. Now, it could be a situation where, again, it could be fault on both of them. And if it's involving a death, I mean, the damages are so big. His insurance policy might not be that big. His insurance company is probably going to pay out on the claim just because of, if he's on the phone, not paying attention, all that kind of stuff. So, but all those things are very fact specific as to whether a claim could be made against somebody or not. Macy, what do you got?
Okay, first question for today. If I am driving in my car and I cause an accident, and it just so happens the accident is bad enough to where the person dies, but it was not an intentional accident, like I just didn't see them, or like I was completely sober and I was completely like not driving over the speed limit, do I go to jail if I get pulled over, obviously, and the whole situation goes down?
And I hope this isn't based on any real life experience you've had. So there's two parts to the law. There is the criminal side, there's the civil side. You guys, most of our TV, like our TV series and things like that, they always revolve around the criminal side because it's really interesting, right? Like, somebody killed somebody and there's a whole investigation and there's a mystery and all that kind of stuff. The civil side is the part where you're essentially working to try to get compensated for an injury, or it might even be a death. A perfect example, and you guys obviously probably have some familiarity with like O.J. Simpson, that whole situation. So there was a criminal trial. He was tried for murder. There was a wrongful death action that was brought against him. And that was a civil action. And in the criminal trial, where for a criminal standard, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Yep. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the person committed the crime. So a really high burden because you're talking about taking away someone's freedom, their liberty, all that stuff. Where somebody is trying to get money out of the person, the burden is less. You only have to prove it's more likely than not that they did it. And so it's a lesser burden because, again, we're not trying to take away their freedom, their life, all the things. You have these two different areas of the law. So on an accident situation like you just described, you're not going to be criminally prosecuted for that situation because, again, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't egregious, reckless. You're saying you weren't impaired, not under the influence. You weren't driving 120 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone, something like that. So again, if you're driving down the street and let's just say you're on your phone, you're texting, or you're distracted in some way, not good, not cool, but it doesn't rise to the level of something criminal. And so the person, let's say you did kill somebody, that person's family could sue you causing that death. And for what we call the damages that have followed from that, from the loss of the life, what it meant to them. If it's, let's say it's a father, two small kids and a wife, you've now taken away, their means of living. So all of that can be pursued in a wrongful death claim. That's a claim that is a civil action. But no, you're not going to be criminally prosecuted. And obviously on the flip side, if you're drunk, if you are driving recklessly or something like that, then yes, it's going to move up. You could have both claims, but a criminal matter could definitely be coming from that, because at that point, it may rise to the level of manslaughter or something like that. So
I was always wondering, why do we need to hire a lawyer for a speeding ticket? And like, what do they do? Because it's like you pay a lawyer and it always gets figured out, but you just never know what happens behind the scenes.
Sure. So with speeding tickets, essentially, it's not really a criminal matter. It's an infraction. And so what happens is police officer pulls you over, gives you a ticket, like I said, speeding, whatever it might be, expired tags, doesn't matter, but it's a moving violation. So you get the speeding ticket, police officer writes that, you're going to have a court date. You can show up, right? And if you want to try and argue that you weren't speeding, something like that, they'll probably set another date where you would actually have a little hearing in front of the judge, and you could make your case as to what. Well, first off, the police officer would have to make the case that you were speeding. And what they'll do is, basically on the officer's testimony, they can testify, I clocked him doing this in this speed limit. He was speeding. They don't have to come in. They don't have to have like some readout from their radar gun or something like that. Now, they're going to probably testify that they were utilizing this radar gun, laser gun, whatever it was, that they had properly calibrated it before the start of their shift, all these things. And the radar produced this result, which showed that you were speeding. Okay. And then they basically proven their case. Then you would have to come in and argue, no, I wasn't speeding, and this is why they're wrong. Obviously, you're probably going to lose that a lot of times. You could get a lawyer to help you, and a lawyer could come in, defend you on it, do everything just like I discussed to try to fight the ticket. What happens when tickets, you hire a lawyer and say, hey, can you help me make this go away so it's not on my record, that type of thing. And, it's important, right? Especially as a young driver, you don't want to get a ticket on your license, because when you get found guilty on a ticket, that puts points on your license, which then if you get so many points, or if you get so many tickets within a certain amount of time, insurance rates go up. That's why people want to keep tickets off of their record in the first place. And that's why if you just go pay the fine, that's the other option. Let's just say it says, for $125, you plead guilty, you pay the fine. Well, boom, you pled guilty. It's going to go on your record. You're going to get points. Okay. So you hire a lawyer and you say, lawyer, can you make this go away? Well, in the ticket world, you're basically, a lawyer goes to the prosecutor and says, look, we could argue about this, right? We could go through the whole thing with a judge, or everybody can save time and come to like a plea agreement on this. And basically the person that got the ticket is pleading guilty to a non-moving violation. And it's literally like defective equipment or something like that. Those are non-point violations. So nothing goes on your record, and essentially it goes away. So that's why people hire lawyers for tickets, so that they can make a ticket go away. And so I hate the word, and I don't know that it's used as much with the younger generation, but it used to be like, oh, can you fix a ticket? And that just like implies two things: that something's wrong with the ticket, it's broken, or that the fix is in, like, ooh, a lawyer's got some secret way of making the ticket go away. And that's really an inappropriate description of the process. Essentially, lawyer shows up, says, we're going to fight this ticket, and they agree. Nobody wants to go through the fight. So the person will plead guilty to something lesser. The ticket will get amended to a non-moving violation, and nothing will show up. You will pay a higher amount in fines. You will pay court costs. So it's going to cost you more, in addition to paying the lawyer a fee for doing the work. But at the end of the day, it's going to save you on insurance. Because again, the other part of it is, if you go out and have a wreck And again, if you're 16, 17, 18, when you're younger and you have a wreck, there's nothing you can do to get out of that, right? You've caused an accident. It's going to affect your rates. But now, if you don't have speeding tickets in your past on your record, then you're helping yourself, because now if you, let's say you have 2 speeding tickets and you have a wreck, I mean, there's a good chance you're just getting canceled by the insurance company altogether. So that's why you hire a lawyer for a speeding ticket.
Let's say you have like your family's involved in an accident, and it was like, let's say your son was driving and they like fall asleep at the wheel because they were tired, and your passenger wasn't buckled up and they get ejected from the car. What would you do in that situation, especially if it was like your sibling or your dad? How would it be between them two, or would it be like, how would you like do a settlement?
Yes. So interestingly enough, you can make a claim against a family member. So in that instance that you just described, although you said the passenger was not buckled up,
The passenger was
there's a law in place that if you're not wearing a seatbelt and the party you're making a claim against can show that the injuries that you're making a claim for were directly caused by the failure to wear the seatbelt, that can play into your fault in it all. But to answer your question on a more general level, you can make a claim against a family member. So let's just say, take the seatbelt out of there. They're seatbelted, driving down the road. This one falls asleep, runs off the road, whatever it is. They've done something negligent and they've hurt their sister. Okay. Sister can make a claim against brother, father, whatever that looks like. But here's the interesting wrinkle. If they're all in the same household, they all live together and essentially under the same insurance policy, they're limited to the state minimum required amount of policy limits that you have to have to legally operate a car on the roadways in Missouri. And what do I mean by all that? To get insurance, to get your car registered, you have to show that you have a $25,000 policy of insurance on your car. That's the minimum that you have to have. So if you're doing a inter-family lawsuit or intra-family situation, the most you can get out of that is the $25,000 from the insurance company.
So you can't really get more
No.
family.
Nope. And it used to be, the way that all unfolded was courts basically said there can't be any, I'm sorry, I think they made a law that said there's just no claim there. Well, court said, no, you've got to at least provide the injured family member with the state minimum that's required for financial responsibility. So that's why you can get up to $25,000.
Can you give more, or would it just be that $25,000?
You're
So like you can't be like my medical bills or anything.
right.
You could.
So no matter what, you're limited to $25,000 on the insurance side of things. Yeah. Well, and it can be really interesting because, again, I've had the situations where people are really hurt, but the law says you're limited. Yep. So keep that in mind.
And then my last question, when you're in an accident or need to find a lawyer and you contact multiple, maybe 2 or multiple, at what point in the conversation or conversations do you have to commit to one? Is there like a contract involved? And if so, what if they like change their mind? Like, oh, I'd rather go with this one, but you're already like committed to it.
Okay, sure. Good question. So you can only have one lawyer representing you. Well, I say that unless a lawyer you hire wants to get help. Okay, that's a different story. But as far as like you going out and you getting multiple lawyers hired, yeah, that's not going to work well at all. And so you do, yes. So the Missouri Supreme Court requires us to have an agreement in writing with our clients, really for the protection of everybody, because that way on their side, they know exactly what the deal is. On our side, we know we're your lawyer, right? And this is our arrangement. So it protects everybody. So yes, you do have an agreement in place when you get a lawyer. You cannot, and I have had that situation where I literally have a law firm and they're like, we represent these people, and they also, or better yet, an insurance company says, hey, we got letters of representation from your law firm and from another law firm. And so then it's like, what in the world's going on? And so then we have to reach out to people and say, you need to make a decision on who you want as a lawyer. So it's kind of a rare situation, but it happens. Now, as far as once you sign an agreement with a lawyer, are you locked in for life? No, you're not. You can terminate a lawyer's services. You may owe the lawyer that you are firing for their time. Like, they can submit a bill. The person that fired the lawyer doesn't have to pay them when they get the bill. But if there's a settlement someday down the road, that lawyer that you fired is going to get paid for the time that they had involved and any expenses or anything like that. Because, sometimes we go out, we pay expert witnesses. Maybe we pay for the black box download, which is $1,200, and all of a sudden we're fired. We have a claim on a future settlement to get that stuff back. So I think I answered about all three of your questions there. So
My question, kind of to piggyback off of that, if people are on their phone driving in an accident or in that situation, how do investigators or lawyers or whoever prove that? Like, how do you prove they were on their phone?
Sure. So with all of our cell phones, there is something, it's called the metadata. So you can literally get, and it's usually through a subpoena, but we can send to a cell phone carrier that we want all this data from that person's cell phone, and it'll show like what they were doing, when they were doing it. Now, on a much more general level, you can get, just showing like if they had been texting, right? Because if you know what time the accident was, basically, then you can start looking at, okay, what was going on in the few minutes beforehand, texting, on a phone call, whatever it was. As far as like if you're using apps and stuff like that, you got to get into this metadata, but it can show like what was running and things like that. And so that becomes important because, shockingly, most people aren't going to just freely admit that they were on their phone. I just had one recently where, and we didn't have to get far enough into it because we ended up settling it, but clearly this kid was not paying attention, or otherwise the accident would not have happened, or he certainly he would have applied his brakes at some point. We were able to get what's called the black box data off the vehicle. So every vehicle has a recorder in it. And if there's a collision, it automatically records what was going on in the 5 seconds before the collision. It shows speed, it shows braking, it shows other things like that, seatbelt usage, all kinds of stuff. And he never stopped. He never applied his brakes. So then my argument was, well, he clearly was distracted. He clearly was either on his phone. Well, his story was he had GPS on, but it was in his console. And again, we never got down the road far enough to find out, was he truly just using GPS? Was he doing something more? But you just started putting all those things together to try to dial in on what's going on with that driver at the time of the accident.
Okay, so let's say you're driving around and they have those like speed signs that show you the speed on the pole or whatever, right? And let's say there's like a tree covering like the like actual sign, right? So you can't see it. So you don't know what, like, you're in a new place, like you don't know where you're going, let's say, and you don't know what the speed limit is. So you're like cruising at a good like 35, okay? And the speed limit's like 25, but you don't know that since like the speed sign was covered by a tree. And then you get pulled over for it and like you end up fighting it or whatever. But like, is that on the city for not like cutting the trees? And then, you know what I mean?
In every city, basically the speed limit is 25 miles per hour unless otherwise posted. So number one, if you don't know what the speed limit is, if you haven't seen a sign, something like that, you need to be doing 25 miles per hour until you know better. So number one, you're not going to have an excuse that, well, I didn't see a speed limit sign or it was obscured or something like that. You are tasked with the knowledge that what the speed limit is unless you know otherwise.
Okay, but who knows that? Nobody knows that unless you're a lawyer and you've studied the books. Like, I wouldn't know to go 25 if said otherwise.
And generally speaking, the speed limit signs aren't going to be covered by a tree. So it's a little bit of a hypothetical because generally the city is going to keep their signage clear for people to see if they're paying attention to the roadway, which we always do, right, Mace? That's a very important thing.
Or like, what about stop signs? Like, there's stop signs in like neighborhoods and stuff where like they are covered by trees. Like, I've seen them driving. I mean, I know they're there.
Yes.
Some people don't see out of four-way.
Yeah, and that
There's stop signs.
yeah, and well, the scary part about that's a good point, and it definitely could be a potential argument. The other thing that's really scary about that is if an accident occurs because somebody doesn't stop. And I mean, we've had situations before where signs have been obscured, and then we've actually say we represent the injured person. And not only do we bring a claim against the driver, but we also bring a claim against the municipality for not keeping their signage clear in that regard. And we've had situations where people pulled out, here's a car, and they just weren't able to see the cars coming. And so on the civil side, there's a much greater argument when signage is obscured like that. No, those are good questions.
Okay, so my question is, one of my good friends' dad drove a motorcycle and his steering wheel went out on him and he couldn't steer it anymore and lost control of the bike and crashed into a tree and passed away. So how would you get a settlement on that, or like what would you do in that situation?
Sure. So if in fact that something mechanically went wrong with the motorcycle, so there are lawyers that specifically look at what we call products liability claims, and meaning, is there some defect in the motorcycle that led to the injury or the death? And so in that situation, obviously I have no idea what exactly happened, but say that family called me and said, Eric, this is what happened. We believe that like the steering wheel, malfunction, he lost control, hit a tree. I mean, again, there's only really one avenue of potential recovery there, which is looking to see if something mechanically went wrong with the motorcycle. Because otherwise, he lost control for whatever reason, ran off the road, hit a tree, and died, and there's nobody else responsible. So those are called products liability claims. And like I said, there's certain lawyers. So generally, if somebody contacts me with something like that, then I get connected with some of the products liability lawyers. And the reason that's sort of a focused area is because they're very expensive to pursue, because immediately, like, you get the motorcycle, you have various experts investigating, examining the motorcycle, breaking it down, looking for possible defects, whatever. And so they're very expensive. You need to know what you're doing, and you need to have that as your sole focus of practice.